Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
And welcome back to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. And we're in the midst of season 1, and we are now with the very much alive young Frankenstein. I'm Alan Sanders, I'm your host.
I'm Walt Murray, your co-host.
And joining us in studios once again, well, through the magic of podcasting, we have us in studios. We've got our good friends from the Mad Max Minute. We have Rick and Julia. Welcome back, guys, to the downstairs secret laboratory of Dr. Frankenstein.
Thank you for having us. It's been such a fun week.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you very much.
So stupid.
Well, here in minute 55, Frankenstein's creature, we already realize, or Frankenstein, he hasn't yet changed his name. Frankenstein's creature is awake and is looking around the room. He's just been told he's going to let him out. And then, of course, Dr. Frankenstein last minute also told Inga have the sedative ready. And we will end this minute with the creature taking some of his very first steps around the room with the good doctor's help. So let's kick off this first minute with the very first thing is slowly unbuckling the straps. Now, Walt, I know in our minds these are steel-banded straps, but they don't seem like... I know what's going to happen later when this guy has like 7 or 8 like chain-linked chains around his neck. Do these look like they'd be enough to hold him? You haven't watched that far ahead?
No, I've only been watching it a minute at a time.
These bands do not seem like they're capable of holding the creature.
Not
had
this
the creature
guy.
Wanted to get up.
No way. I don't think so. And yeah, they just don't. This may be the least secure thing they could put him in. And it's not even really like clamped down hard. I would think that he could get right out of that.
Well, when he moves the last one in place, and Rick, Julie, I'll ask you this too, when you're looking at the last of the 4 bands that he sort of releases, there's a shake. They don't feel very sturdy.
Right. The pins that are holding them in place at either end aren't latched down tight. They aren't in a position where you think, oh, yes, that could definitely hold a, what is he, like 300-400 pounds conservatively?
Certainly a large gorilla.
Yeah, he's pushing 4.
There's definitely a lot of weight to the guy. There's no doubt about it, being as big as he is. And of course, we've mentioned this before. The actor, Peter Boyle, actually had about 125 pounds worth of costuming that went around him to give him the girth and the weight and to help him lumber more like a reanimated corpse than they have the agility of the other characters. But when I see those bands popping up and the chains just basically kind of held loosely in place, I mean, it doesn't feel like this is a very secure table for what you're doing. I question the doctor's methodology here.
Yeah, I do too. And I know that it is the same laboratory from the original 1931, but yeah, that really is not it's one of the least convincing things I think in this movie to me, that I would have to go with a lot stronger device to hold this guy down.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I may not be right, but I'm not wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
While the doctor is unleashing these, what I would consider less than adequate safety measures to keep a 6'5", gorilla in place, we have a really funny shot of Igor and Inga, and it happens right around second number 7. Up until this point, Walt, Igor has always popped up from behind other people. Mm-hmm. This is the first time we don't even see Terry Garr in second 7, and eventually she completely pops up from behind him as if using Igor as the shield.
Yeah, and she has a very kind of tentative look on her face that she doesn't know what's going on, but she is using Igor as her shield.
Now, Julia, do you often do this when you go to a strange, place in town and you've got Rick in front of you? Do you let him be the shield, take the bullets for you?
Yes. He's more of my emotional shield, though, and my social shield. I'm not great in social situations, and Rick is fine. He's very friendly and outgoing, so I'll I'll hide behind him and let him talk to people.
And then you kind of poke your head out from behind his hump.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. My humps, my lovely lady lumps.
Well, you know what I like about this particular reversal of these two characters, and Walt, when we were descending into the secret lairs in the castle, when Dr. Frankenstein was initially trying to discover where the sound of the violin was coming from, because it was so dark, it often looked like Igor's head was this disembodied head, because he'd have his cloak, and it was dark, and so all of a sudden you just see this google-eyed face just kind of floating around. Now you've got basically Terry Garr's head floating up from behind him. You don't see really her shoulders. You don't see her dress. It just looks like a...
Yeah.
Here's
like
Terry
Killjoy.
Yeah.
Or Kilroy. She's like
Kilroy was
Kilroy
here,
popping
yeah.
up behind.
I wonder, is this how Master rides Blaster?
It's visually how that works.
Because it feels very similar, but she's obviously very concerned that this experiment now, which she was, by the way, very excited about initially, is now really concerned about this thing that actually is alive. See, that's the whole thing. It's like kids, they got all these grand ideas and they think it's going to be great, but when it actually comes to, to life, it's not quite what you expected.
No, and now you do have this 7-foot tall gorilla who's completely unpredictable. You don't know what to expect from him that you now have to deal with.
Right, and you can't take him back to the animal shelter just because Christmas is over and suddenly they have to pick up all the poop.
We don't like him anymore.
Yep. Likewise, you can't just bring it out to the woods and let it run off because Easter's a couple of weeks out and they're really tired of taking care of him. Trying to think of what other
You can't take him
holidays.
behind the barn with a shovel like Old Yeller and
Guys are terrible.
Oh,
Wait a second.
that went dark.
I don't remember there being a shovel at the end of Old Yeller. Maybe once the deed was done, but not for the deed itself.
I wasn't
might have read one of
necessarily
those
insinuating
edited
for the
versions.
deed itself.
Oh my God, you're going to whack the dog with the shovel?
I was going dark, but not that dark.
Holy
That's
mother.
that's the version of Old Yeller that they tell in New Jersey.
Roll him up in a rug.
We took him to the farm.
That's the Goodfellas version of Old Yeller.
Yeah, boss, we took him to the farm. Took care of him. He's running in a field with his friends. Wink. You're like, Sully, don't say wink out loud. Right, boss.
Right,
Wink.
boss. And now I'm suddenly transported to the raccoon in Guardians of the Galaxy in Guardians Volume 2. And he's like, oh, yeah. Wink. He's like, I'm winking with the wrong eye, aren't I? They can see that one, right? It is interesting to see this because she is certainly very tentative and is keeping a good distance. Igor, on the other hand, is certainly not doing his normal histrionics. He's rock solid. Normally, his head's swaying from side to side. He's very dog-like through much of the movie, acting like, speaking of all these references we're giving, Igor certainly is the one who acts more like a dog than anybody else. But and is distracted like a dog. Eyes always going all over the place. But he is very stoic at this moment. And it does, I guess, convey for just a minute, they are hesitant. There is that sense of, this could go bad.
Well, it also, I think, shows Marty Feldman's confidence as an actor. There are a lot of scenes that he can steal, and this is one of them, and he doesn't. He is in his role. He plays his part. He lets Inga get the spotlight of kind of doing the pop-up behind him, and he doesn't do anything goofy or over the top. But Inga also, at the first part of this minute, when they first came down and stood next to the gurney there, she had a very tentative, nervous look about her as they were standing there. So she is, she's definitely trying to figure out what's going on here and how this is all going to play out.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if she ever thought this was actually going to work.
Yeah, good point. Because, I mean, really, like, who's crazy enough to think that you could reanimate a dead body?
Well, if that's the case, why was she so into helping the doctor to begin with?
Well,
Because that's her job.
Exactly. She's dutiful.
So it's just about collecting a paycheck?
Oh, I think she also likes the doctor.
Well, there is that.
I think it's more than just collecting a paycheck. I think she feels a loyalty to the doctor and to the work itself rather than actually believing it's going to work. She's loyal to the effort, not the result.
It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. The radical scientific discovery was the friends that we made along the way.
Aww. Well,
You're such a sweetheart.
So, from what I'm gathering, what I'm hearing from this is, even though we might have nightmare rise from the dead jobs, the act that we actually do the job is what's worth doing.
Right. Satisfaction and happiness in life can be derived from putting in a good effort into the things that we do, more so than getting a massive result out of the efforts that we participate in. You can find joy in the process of laying brick, and you don't necessarily have to derive happiness from the fact that you built a wall.
Wow. Maybe I think I've just figured out what I've been doing wrong my whole life.
Yeah, I knew it'd come eventually.
Oh, I need a sad bell.
Well, and two, she's not the architect of this. She's the helper and the minion's probably not the right word, but she's the assistant. And so she plays the assistant. She plays the assistant part where, Dr. Frankenstein is the creator. He is the haymaker here. And she has dutifully performed her task. And now as the task is coming to a completion or whatever, she doesn't know what to think about it.
I'm so in a different place all of a sudden when you said she has so dutifully performed her task, and now she's in a different place. I'm sorry.
Am I missing something?
Honey,
we all are.
You may not like it, but just try it. Go on. Just try it.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. I think I got it now.
And like usual, they look very horrified when...
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Just your choice of words. And I immediately went completely into, I don't know.
Did I mention that Alan is 14?
That
had my
so much
suspicions.
sense.
What it was is I was listening and I was like, well, that used to happen. Now we have kids and jobs, and we're just happy if we get to watch a TV show together. And now I look like Ingham. Oh. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
All right, well, let's keep the minute moving forward. He does get the straps up, and we are looking down on Peter Boyle as the creature. And when finally told to sit up, he does sit up to a sitting position, his legs across the table. But there is an interesting joke here that Walt, I don't know if we'll agree entirely, but I didn't catch this until now. When he leans his legs off the edge of the table, the raised metal area
the hook
that
or
the
the
pin would
grommet,
go
yeah,
through to hold the bands down is between his legs. And as he starts to inch forward, he suddenly stops for a minute, and you get the sense that something's not quite right.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was a mistake because when they cut back to him, he's not sitting on it anymore.
No, I think he is. But the thing is, it makes it funnier now when he makes that grunting. It goes from the to like, wait, there's something sticking up in areas I don't need sticking up.
Yeah, that was, and it is odd because when he slides off, you can see it's not underneath. It was not underneath him when they cut back to him because I kept looking at that too. But it's kind of a weird misplacement because he swings his legs over. It's right there underneath him. They cut away to his face, and then they cut back, and he slides off. And
well, because he's looking down, he's making the grunt. It's obviously like there's something stuck where it shouldn't be stuck.
Yeah, but watch when he slides off, it's not there anymore.
But when he comes off, it's to his left. Yeah, they've repositioned him, which of course doesn't make the joke as funny anymore, but I thought he was making that noise because something went up the tuchus.
That's what I thought too, or somewhere else near there.
Which goes to show, even this grotesque giant monster, there's certain areas where you're just like, whoa, exit only, deliveries
Feelings.
are not, no deliveries in the rear.
I'm sorry, Friday has taken a weird turn with Alan.
Well, it's almost time. Well, it's not almost quitting time. Well, maybe depending when you're listening to this. But I mean, am I missing that though? Doesn't that seem to be part of the joke? Because why does he change the pitch of his?
See, I think that they messed up when he was making that turn. I think he was just scared to get off the table. Is what it was supposed to be.
Oh, is that?
That's what I think. But I
yeah, that's what I took it as.
Yeah, because I think when they came back and had him slide off the table, it wasn't underneath him anymore. It was beside him. So they had kind of repositioned him. So when I watched it the first time through, I thought, oh, okay, well, I had missed that joke before. But then I realized when he slid off the table that it was not underneath him.
Well, it definitely has been, the actor has been repositioned to make it easier when we cut back to him, and it certainly is no longer underneath his leg or between his legs. But initially, when you pointed that out, I was like, oh my God, that is so funny that he's squawking because there's something stuck up his derriere. But, again, when we come back to when he finally does hop off the table, it's not there. Either way, it's still a funny little moment. It's still
funny. Yeah, it is still funny. Well, did you notice his shoes, the spikes in his shoes are all worn off in this scene? They're
the same boots. They're the same.
They're the same boots, but it's like all the metal pins have been ground into his shoes instead of sticking out as obviously as they were before.
Maybe
so
it's the angle. I'm not sure because I know we actually, and I didn't write it down, but we did have some guys from the show BK on the Air. One of the hosts of BK or co-hosts of BK on the Air actually counted every one of those individual little divots on of his boots.
Oh dear! Wow.
And they first of all, which I think is amazing because we had somebody do that and they did it for free. But they're not the same number on each boot, and he actually counted the number on the foot portion versus the heel portion, and those don't match up either. And I think it comes up to a total of 191 total little divots or whatever on those boots.
I mean, we're used to seeing stuff like that on the outside of leather jackets, not so much on the bottom of shoes.
No, I made the joke that right around this time of year, I want this guy walking my yard and aerating it for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to worry about hiring somebody. I'd say, hey, come here, Frankenstein's monster. I need you to kind of walk the yard for a bit. Can I get you to take the dogs out and aerate the yard at the same time?
That would be a nice bonus.
Well, he does eventually get off the table here, and he does lean forward. I love this shot to help us establish just how big the creature is. This camera is set just behind Gene Wilder, just behind the doctor, and sort of at his level of maybe a shoulder, and it's sort of angled up just a little bit so that when Frankenstein's monster reaches full height, it almost looks like he's growing before our eyes. It's just a great, fantastic shot. Gene Wilder kind of backs up out of the way, and when he's at full height, and you got kind of the blurred out, the depth of field of the shot, the lab equipment behind him, and you just see him, and you just get the sense that this is an enormous character.
Mm-hmm.
The humongous is in the room.
The humongous. Well, he definitely looks more like a monster now than he did when he was laying on the table.
And it also almost feels like they're doing some sort of perspective trick, putting Peter Boyle closer to the camera, putting Gene Wilder further away, and then when they swing around so that Gene Wilder's in front, it's almost like they've set up some sort of choreography so that Gene Wilder would dip down a little bit to emphasize the height.
Yeah, because he does seem to almost bow a little as his head, and you see the bits of his hair kind of pull finally back out of frame as the monster reaches full height. It's just a nice little moment that once again shows and we had Paul Sullivan from Sully Baseball who mentioned that there are moments, and I love using his word, where they're exquisite moments of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. It's just that sense of camera, lighting, actors all working together to create a moment of just a beautiful cinematic moment, telling the story, no words. You don't have Dr. Frankenstein saying, my God, look how big you are, look how tall you are. It's just we watch the scene play out, and we can just admire the shot and get a sense of the enormity of the character.
And it really is a beautiful scene with, all the equipment from the original Frankenstein and the two of them playing off each other in the middle of the room, and then Inga and Igor standing there just kind of awestruck.
I couldn't help but think of Madeline Kahn from Blazing Saddles. Is it true what they say about men like you?
Oh, it is true. It is true. So do you know the joke that was taken out of that scene. Cleavon Little had a line that he says next, and of all the things that the censors made them take out of Blazing Saddles, well, there weren't many. Of all the things that the censors left in Blazing Saddles, do you know what the following line was that they had to cut?
No, what was it?
Cleavon Little says, "Honey, you're sucking on my arm."
Oh my God.
I can see why they cut that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know what she's supposed to be doing, or feeling, or touching, or whatever. But I thought that was hysterical that Mel Brooks told the story of how they made him drop that one line. So just after the "it's true, it's true, it's true," "Honey, you're sucking on my arm."
They probably could have gotten away with just about anything else.
Well, they did.
moment, but yeah, well,
For some reason, that was the line that they dropped. One of the lines they dropped out of there. And I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's because we're much more enlightened today. I don't know what it is about today, but I didn't think that was as bad. But I guess the 70s censors, they were okay with all the innuendo, all of the use of the N-word and blah, blah, blah. But something about that, although they did want them to take the fart noises out, which for network television,
they did.
They were forced to take the fart noises out.
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously,
Talk about
society's-
taking the wind out of a scene.
Yeah, because I never understood why that scene was really all that funny, because they kept replacing it with horse whinnies. Every time somebody would make a noise, it was always a horse, either a horse going or whoo, and eventually Taggart comes out and is like, "You want some beans, Mr. Taggart?" I'd say, "You boys had enough." I'm like, I don't know, why is that funny?
Yeah, except that he fans his hat.
'Cause the
and I
first
was like,
time-
oh, gotcha.
Well, the
okay.
first time I ever saw Blazing Saddles was on network television. I didn't see it in the movie theater. So when I saw it on network television, all of the racial epithets were perfectly intact in the movie. And a lot of scenes were actually put into the movie that are not in the theatrical release that I actually wish they would put in. But they took all the fart noises out. It's just amazing what censors back in the day when they were looking to port movies to television, what was okay for a television audience and what wasn't. And nowadays, I think they'd put the fart noises in, no problem, but they'd take all the N-words out, which would no longer make any point to Blazing Saddles.
Right, which was kind of the point of Blazing Saddles.
Right. Oh, I love when we go off trails like that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this, because we wrestled with this of what movie to do first of all the movies Gene Wilder did. And I think arguably his big three that everyone knows or the majority of people would know is Willy Wonka, Blazing Saddles, and Young Frankenstein. But can we, in today's hypersensitive, sort of like that political correctness to the point where the political correctness is ridiculous now, could you do a podcast of that movie and people get it?
The important thing as far as the racial epithets in Blazing Saddles is concerned, and I'm probably not the exact person that you'd want talking on this subject, but I think if you have a healthy respect for how the word was used in decades prior and what it meant in those contexts, you could find ways to reference it without being gratuitous.
Well, we're wrestling with that, and I honestly, because of that, I'm pretty sure it won't be our second or maybe even our third season before we delve into that. I almost feel like I hate it because it is my absolute favorite Gene Wilder movie in terms of the whole movie from start to end. I like it even more than Young Frankenstein. I mean, I think Willy Wonka is his finest performance, but I think the Blazing Saddles movie, the story it's telling and the learning to work together and how stupid prejudice is and that we only get better by working together, and that message is so clear by the end of the movie. I want to do it. I want people to appreciate it. I just fear the climate we're in, no one will even give it a chance.
Well, and I think, too, that that movie was a condemnation of racism and a condemnation of people being mistreated, except for the one line about the Irish, which, as an Irishman, I still find funny.
What does he say about the Irish? He says, we just don't want the Irish.
Yeah, they basically said, we'll take anybody. And he said, well, except the Irish.
And then they make him say, no deal. Like, all right, fine, everybody. Which is funny being delivered by an Irish actor.
Yes, right.
But
still, I think that people would miss the fact that it wasn't a positive use of that word. It was, the whole movie was a condemnation of people who would use that word and who would have those racist views. But I don't know that right now our culture could get that. I don't think people could get past that word.
I'm curious what Julie has to think.
I think that starting with Young Frankenstein was a really smart move. Either Young Frankenstein or Willy Wonka, either one would have worked well as a first movie. Build your audience, find your voices as podcasters, and then you can approach Blazing Saddles with a little more nuance and education and insight into yourselves as podcasters and your listeners as Gene Wilder fans. And I think down the road a little bit, you'll know how to handle it.
Yeah. I mean, sincerity goes a long way.
Yes.
No, you got a point there. And what's amazing about it, and I know we've strayed too far away already from Young Frankenstein, but I think what is amazing, the number of individuals in whatever political camp you want to put yourself that will all say, and I've heard from the comedians to the late night show hosts to the news personalities, everyone almost invariably loves Blazing Saddles or has fond memories of watching it for the first time and laughing about it and understanding the message. And yet, I don't know if those same individuals would always be as accepting today if that movie were to be released today. Does that make sense? It's like they can appreciate it and they seem to respect it and they laughed at it, but if it came out today, I think they would condemn it.
I expect that movie probably came out at maybe the only time that it could have come out.
Yeah.
People are too quick to knee-jerk react to things.
Today? Yeah.
Because we live in a 24-hour news cycle where everything has to come fast and furious and under 280 characters. Nobody wants to actually read the article. They're only interested in the headline. They don't even want to click on a link. They want to jump right into a comment section and go to town on whoever commented before them. I think you needed to release a movie like that in the time where people would need to go to a theater, sit down, invest the time to watch it, and then comment on it. These days, I think people are too quick.
Right. And I do think there's that moment, and it is just the culture we live in, where we're more reactionary, and it's all about trying to prove while we're reacting that, well, this isn't me. I would never accept that, because we're trying to almost like portray as if somehow you were being condemned already by liking a movie like that. You know, it's almost like you're quick to say, well, that's not me. I don't like that. And I don't know. We'll see when we get there. I think, Julia, you've given us the absolute best advice, and it's sort of like where we came to, Walt, is let's build the audience. Let's pick 2 or 3 other movies. We've got plenty of Gene Wilder material to choose from. I know there's probably going to be a group of people out there saying, how come you haven't done Blazing Saddles yet? So, well, we may eventually get to it. It may be our swan song.
It may be.
It may be the one where we're kicked off the podcasting airwaves.
Well, this Young Frankenstein's always been my favorite Gene Wilder movie, and Mel Brooks movie for that matter. So this was
You got your way.
I got my way. This was an easy choice.
You bet your boots you did.
But I think this is just such a great movie, and even this minute of the movie, when we are really introduced to the Frankenstein monster as he comes off the table, there's humor, there's intrigue, I guess. There is a really great shot of him as the monster that is a convincing monster. It's not humorous. It's not a joke. This is a Frankenstein monster. And having seen this as a kid, this was how I perceived Frankenstein for years until I saw the 1931 version. Well, and even still, I think now looking at the two movies side by side, the 1931 version is a little bit more cartoonish than this version is.
Well, it doesn't help that every version of Frankenstein we see in cartoons is the Boris Karloff, flat head, bolts in the neck, shirt too short, pants too short, giant boots. It has become a bit of a caricature.
Yeah.
You guys may not have known this, but as close as this looks like to Frankenstein's monster, the one element that Universal Pictures has copyrighted and owns the trademark of the image until 2026 is the flat head. They could not recreate the flat head for this monster.
Interesting. I would have assumed it was the bolts in the neck.
That's what I thought you were going to say too.
Yep. Nope. It's the flat head. That's their version of Frankenstein, which is why the Munsters on television was okay, because that was a Universal MCA production. But you couldn't have a Frankenstein with a flat head until 2026, when that trademark, I guess, runs out legally. So
I would venture to say that after 2026, nobody will use the flathead anyway.
I prefer this anyway. I never understood, it's still a skull. What were you doing?
Yeah, right. To flatten him out.
Again, is it a place to put your beer? I mean, I don't know.
Let him lay on his head too long?
Well, and let's, before, as we start to wrap up, and I know I always hate it. It's bittersweet when we come to Friday. I've always had so much fun with our guests coming and joining us and chatting about these minutes. You guys have had your share of, quote, monsters to look at in the Mad Max universe. Are there any, and I can't think of any, but have you found any that have any sense of that redemption? You feel sorry for, the creature's circumstance or the monster's circumstance? I mean, usually we're happy when they eventually get their comeuppance in the Mad Max world.
Oh, absolutely, yes. In the pairing of Master Blaster, when Blaster meets his demise, it's revealed that he is
intellectually disabled.
Yes. And in our analysis, we've kind of discovered that Master's treatment of Blaster can be viewed as abusive and manipulative. Mm-hmm. So half of this villainous pairing meeting his demise, it all of a sudden very quickly turns very sad.
Yeah, you're right. As far as I guess I never thought of him as being sort of the main villain, but he is sort of the monster at that moment. And you do have that all of a sudden sense of, even though Master was sort of using Blaster, when he's hurt, there's a sense of this is like my son almost. He's very, affectionate to his bigger, larger counterpart that helps him get around. Mm-hmm. Wow. I may have to go back and rewatch that movie. Maybe it's one of those things where it may be better now than I last remember it.
I feel like a lot of people on their initial viewing of Thunderdome, they got distracted by all of the bright lights, pigs, and star power, and they missed the nuance, especially in Bartertown specifically.
Well, it's funny because in a trilogy, I found that with the Raiders of the Lost Ark trilogy, because there is only 3 movies, just so we're clear. But upon rewatching Last Crusade, because I remember thinking it was so anticlimactic, it felt weird, it felt just didn't feel. And maybe it was because when my dad had passed away, it was when I had watched it within a few months afterwards. I had a whole new appreciation for the father-son pairing and what they were trying to do, and still harken back to Raiders. It's not as good as Raiders, but it moved up a lot more than what my recollection of the movie had been.
Yeah, you could definitely argue that Last Crusade is kind of a color-by-numbers copy of Raiders, where they maybe used a different color palette.
Yeah, but it's still, I guess what I'm trying to say is my memory of it being not as good sort of, I guess, festered over time to where I really didn't want to watch it. And when I got into the Indiana Jones podcast, I said, well, I might as well go watch it because I'm about to start those minutes. And I thought to myself while I was watching, this is not nearly as bad as I remembered it. For some reason, it had sort of aged the wrong way. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I completely understand what you're saying.
So are you guys finding that out, I guess, about Thunderdome?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I'm going to have to give it another go. I'll give it another go for you guys.
Yeah, I will too. I think as I get older, I appreciate things about movies a little bit more. Maybe the character development and sometimes even the story. That when I initially watched a movie, I had an expectation of it's going to be just like the original, and that is a failing when you become such a fan of the original. And version 1 that you can't accept the others as for what they are.
Well, it explains the angst against The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A whole lot of people don't like that movie, and I've said, and I don't know how you guys feel. I think so many people have become Star Wars fans their whole lives, so they wrote the movie they wanted in their heads, and they didn't get the movie they wrote in their heads, and so therefore it must be a terrible movie.
I agree.
I think that's spot on.
Yeah. Oh, so I'm assuming you liked it.
I did.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I knew it had things that was like, wow, you're going that direction with it. But yeah, I was happy with a kind of taking the universe in a new direction instead of just rehashing to the letter almost everything from the original trilogy. Well, look we've got friends in the Mad Max world. This is awesome. Seriously,
you do.
Guys, it has been great having you join us for this week. And you guys are you deal with like Lord Humongous and the Toe Cutter and other big giant baddies, and we've got a pretty big baddie here in Young Frankenstein, although ours has a little more sense of, we feel bad for him at times. But we appreciate you guys taking time out of your podcast to come join us over here in Transylvania. Before we say goodbye, is there anything else on this minute or in just Young Frankenstein in general that you want to say about the movie.
Well, I really like how this minute ends with the monster up and walking around with Frankenstein. And I feel like at this point in the movie, we can just chalk this one up as a win and, just put it on the shelf. You know what? Happy ending. Everything worked out fine. I'm pretty sure nothing bad is going to happen from this point on.
No, it's all flower. Oh no, that's not a good reference. It's all happiness from here on.
Right.
When you
the
said
monster's
flower,
alive. He's walking. No need to push any further.
Where were you going with flower? Walking Dead?
No. You know what happens with the flower?
Oh, okay.
Have you watched the rest of the movie?
No, I've only watched just this minute, just now. No, because after The Walking Dead, when Carol makes the one like really rotten girl, takes her out like Old Yeller and says, "Just look at the flowers." I was like, that always sticks with me. Just look at the flowers.
Yeah, that's harsh.
Well. Now that I've just completely ruined our Friday. So, you guys, I want to again thank you for being here. Julie, anything you had for this minute, or just in general, Young Frankenstein for you?
No, I think we about covered it.
I guess I know I'm stretching it out because again, I feel like Gene Wilder. He kept wanting to add scenes at the end of the movie when they were filming. He's like, well, there's just one more scene. Well, just one more scene.
Just one more question.
Mel Brooks went up to him and said, "Why? We're done." And he said, "I just don't want to leave." The question I have for you, and I think we started the week off this way, but I don't know if I was as pointed in my question. In terms of comedies, where does this fall for both of you in terms of all the comedies you kind of have in your top echelon? If you had to kind of rank right now off the top of your head your top comedies, where does Young Frankenstein fall?
Well, I'm not sure that I can give it a specific place without a lot more thought, but it is quite high. It's one of those movies that is reliably funny. I'm always going to find it funny. Its humor is always going to land with me. There are some movies that you find funny only when you're in a certain mood. This is not one of those. This movie and its humor transcends whatever crankiness I may be feeling.
That's a nice way of saying it. And it's aged well. It doesn't, where some of the other Mel Brooks movies, especially later Mel Brooks movies, you go back and rewatch, they're not quite as funny as they were when you were maybe a lot younger seeing them for the first time.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't think I've ever even tried to compile a list of favorite comedies before. This is a different thought experiment for me. I definitely agree with what Julia said, the idea that it has a timeless feature about it. And I was trying to think of like horror comedies specifically, and you think of stuff like the zombie comedies. You've got Zombieland and Shaun of the Dead and whatnot. These very different directors. And what I like about Young Frankenstein that the other ones don't usually do is that it's not relying so much on gags. Like, there are legitimate jokes. It's leaning very heavily on its cast as opposed to things happening around the cast. And I think that's just a testament to Wilder and Gar and Feldman, all of them being able to work together as a team to really elevate this film. So as far as casts are concerned, like, this is definitely one of the greats.
No, I don't disagree. And actually, I think it was Paul Sullivan who said that for him, this was the best that you would ever see the two of them together doing. And he said, you could tell Gene Wilder tempered the zaniness of Mel Brooks, and Mel Brooks brought out the wackiness of Gene Wilder.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of those together kind of tempered each other to the point where you really have it's a classic, masterfully made movie. It's a monster movie. It's a comedy, and it works on both levels, and it is timeless right now. We've shown it to people as young as in their early 20s, to folks who are in their late 70s who remember seeing it in the theater the first time, and everyone has found that it's a watchable movie still, it's a funny movie still, that there's layers to it, and I think maybe that's why we're talking about it now.
Yeah, and I think if you had paired Gene with any of his future co-stars, Richard Pryor or anybody else, this would not have been the same movie. And we've said before that, if it had been in color, and that's, one of the questions that's come up before on the show. If this was filmed in color, how different a film do you think this would be, and do you think you would like it as much as you do?
I think it would be less timeless if it was in color. I think it would end up being a little bit more dated. Yeah, so because it's black and white, it's automatically an old movie.
Right.
And they're driving us with their styles and whatnot into the 30s, even though we're explicitly told this is taking place, like, right now, right? Like, in the 70s when it was filmed.
Right. The idea is it starts off contemporary whenever the movie is. It was when it was released. But yes, we are certainly not in... There's nothing about this movie that feels 1974 once we get to Transylvania. All right, well, guys, it's time for us to all call it an end of our workday. We've got the weekend upon us. We've got the entire weekend to think about this week's worth of minutes and maybe get caught up on some of the other minutes. And if folks who are listening to us maybe for the first time or listen to you guys for the first time today, and they're like, wait a minute, they talked an awful lot about Mad Max and the Mad Max Minute. Where can they go and get all caught up on your podcast?
Well, if people are interested in hearing more of our material, our home on the internet is madmaxminute.com. That's where you can find all of our Mad Max-centric material. However, that's not the only place you can find us. I've been saving this for the weekend. If you are able to listen to our stuff, you like what you hear, and you want to hear something else, we have a Patreon page. You can find it by going to madmaxminute.com. There's a support link up at the top of the page. That'll bring you over to our Patreon. And over on Patreon, we are doing a little sideshow called Anarchy Road, where we more or less head off the beaten path, and we are going 5 minutes at a time through the movie Hook, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Dustin Hoffman and Robin Williams. And we are actually in week 9 at this point, which is great because Captain Hook gets to make his grand entrance. Tinkerbell shows up and is spying on him there. They bring out the Boo Box. There's that great Glenn Close cameo. And we get to see Shmi and Captain Hook argue about Peter's true identity. So
wow. Now, and that's only available to those folks who want to be a subscriber to get that bonus material.
Yep, we're pretty cheap as far as bonus content goes. We're only $3 a month to unlock the podcast there. It's a fun exercise because I do all of the producing for the regular show, and the Patreon show is Julia's opportunity to step up from the hosting chair into the producer's chair.
Excellent. Well, that is really cool. Now, unfortunately, I think you've picked one of the weaker Spielberg movies from. But
but it's the Spielberg movie where a man is stripped of his possessions and dropped into a situation where he's surrounded by children and he's got to deal with it. So there is a narrative theme that is similar to Thunderdome.
Oh, I like that. I do like that. Which is why we picked
that one.
That does work. Now, look, and when I say that, when you're ranking Spielberg movies from best to worst, there are directors whose best efforts don't match to Spielberg's worst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it has been so great to have you on our podcast this week, and we really appreciate it. And I hope all of our listeners, if you are, you're all caught up with us and you want to try another one and you're a fan of the Mad Max world, go on by and check them out. Walt, if somebody wants to learn a little bit more about us and what we're doing on this Wilder ride, where can they go?
Well, we also have a Patreon page. You can find us at patreon.com/thewilderride. There's some opportunities there to be a part of our team and to help out with some of our costs. You can also find us at thewilderride.com. And from there, you can find all the great places to stay in touch with us, to be a part of the community, and to let us know what you think about the podcast.
All right. You guys have a great weekend. You guys, Julia and Rick, get back to all the things going on in Bartertown and try to get, maybe get Max a haircut and stuff and see what you can do with him. But we appreciate everybody being here until Monday when we come on back. On Monday, we are going to be diving into Inga yelling at the doctor, "Oh, doctor, I'm frightened." And we will end with, "Oh, Tiv, sedative." So there's a lot that happens between being frightened and yelling "Tiv, sedative." So we'll have to wait and see. Come on back Monday for more of Dr. Frankenstein.
And it's alive.
Alive. Alive. Who run Bartertown?
I knew I was going to throw you the highest.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to yell the other.